Okay, we are live. Good evening. It is Kay, and I'm here with Tali. And it is December 23rd, 2025. Happy holidays, everybody. Happy holiday season.
Yes.
Hope everybody is surviving the mad dash to Christmas and New Year's, and everyone had a happy Hanukkah who celebrates. How are you doing, Tali?
Staying alive. Yeah, this holiday season I feel like is about to get good, stressful and good. So,
Yeah.
excited to finish this year off. It's been a weird year.
Yeah. I feel that. Go into 2026 and see what else happens.
Yeah, I don't know what to expect from 2026, but I'm eager to get there. I feel like in so many ways a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about and that we talk about is sort of like future oriented. We're kind of, looking ahead of the politics that we find ourselves in. So, yeah, ready to get started on the next phase.
Yeah, no, I feel that. I feel like I don't know. Every time I guess we're at the end of the year and into the holiday season, and because where I live, it's like so cold and stuff that it's like yeah, I'm kind of curious for next year, but it's like I don't know. It's almost like for me, it's like maybe the year will start in March when things melt because it's like winter's just I don't know. I'm just gonna like hole up and cocoon for the next 2 months and kind of like watch the world happen for a little bit rather than do as much as I want in it. But yeah, I'm about ready to wrap this one up and move on to the next one.
I have some nostalgia about your cocooning in the winter. I come from the cold and I went to school in Buffalo. And living in Hawaii, I think it is probably better for me generally to like have sun and light and like, daytime and all of these things. But I do miss that, the ability to just like hide under blankets and in hoodies and stuff like that and kind of enjoy the cold in that way. But that's what visiting my parents in New York is for.
Yeah, I know. I can see that. It gives you an excuse when it's like so cold just to kind of like be lazy for a little bit. It's much more difficult even for me in the summer to like not do as much because I want to get outside. You know what I mean? I don't want to get in. But here, it's not so bad now. But once it's like minus, 20 and it's cold and it's full of snow, it's like who wants to, I don't know. It's like you use the outdoors to get back indoors type of thing.
Right.
And every year, and as I get older, I'm like, why do I live here? Why do I live in this climate, But like, I'm not going anywhere now, but.
Do you ever see yourself making a move?
Potentially, but too many kids,
like
too many young
kids out of the house type of thing.
Yeah. And like family. And I kind of like, I really love Montreal. I like traveled. I was like all over the place when I was in like my early 20s and stuff. And that was like super fun. But it just made me, it made me know that Montreal was my home,
Yeah.
But I could see like, I don't know if I want to be like a super old person here. Like, I see like really old people, like little old ladies.
Interesting point.
Grandparents like trying to make their way around in like the snow and falling. So, maybe become one of those like one of those Montrealers who just goes down and like stays in Florida for the winter.
Yeah, the snowbirds. That's a very New York thing to do.
Yeah, it's a very Montreal thing to do too. It's like a very common Jewish phase of life when you start to like when you get a timeshare in Florida or like a condo,
absolutely
you go down from like after Christmas or Hanukkah until the second week of March when the city kind of like thaws out again. But, let's see. Yeah. Oh, hello, Weld QC John. How's it going? the chat. So what are we going to talk about tonight, Tali?
So I think we wanted to talk about, some of the America Fest speeches and responses, and it dovetails nicely on all the things that we've been commenting on now for a bit. And then in a slightly hyper specific content, Noam Dworman of the Comedy Cellar had on Josh Hammer yesterday for his podcast, and they did like a live version of it, and it got pretty contentious, and there's been some fallout since then online, and you and I are both fans of Noam, so that'll be interesting for us to talk about too.
Yeah, no, definitely. How much of AmFest did you see? I saw, I didn't see, I don't know if it was like all broadcast or whatever, but I've caught like some of the major speeches and talks. Definitely saw the Ben Shapiro, the Tucker, the Megan, some of the Nikki stuff. The I guess the stuff that's like really going around.
Yeah, no, same. I caught videos of the speeches and I guess the conversation. I guess most of them were speeches, right? With the exception of Megan and Jack and Nikki and Erica, from what I could see, or from like you're saying, from the ones that got a lot of attention. And then I've seen some Q&A videos of like the crowd. So I've seen some like much smaller broadcasters who went around and asked people who were at the convention like what some of their thoughts were on the speeches and on the kind of beef between Ben and Tucker most prominently. And then do you follow Ami Kozak?
Yeah.
We might have talked about him before. Yeah. Okay. So him and he runs a podcast, Ami's House, with his a nice young Jewish man, Michael, and the two of them put out an episode today. And Ami was at AmFest. He was there as like a VIP, so he didn't speak, but he was kind of in with the VIPs basically. So he reflected on his experience, and that was pretty interesting. Maybe we could talk about that too. I don't know if you caught that.
I didn't, but I'd just be interested in hearing. His views on it. Oh, I'm curious about. So you said that they did some, like you saw some, like audience type of people, I guess, giving their views on the feud. So what was the vibe that you got from that?
Now, I didn't really know anything about the people who were doing the interviewing, like the guys who were, doing these Q&As. And obviously I didn't know any of the random attendees that they were speaking to. So I don't know exactly what the position of those people asking the questions was. But from one that I watched, just for example, the interviewer seemed more hostile to Ben and more like aligned with Tucker, sort of pushing the like, why couldn't the two of them have sat down together with
Oh, you're frozen for a second, Tali. I wonder if Tali's frozen for everybody. There, you're back.
Yes, I'm back. Okay.
I think you got cut off at like why couldn't they have sat down with each other?
Right. And that was actually kind of a common refrain from a lot of people, which seems like most people probably aren't necessarily following this so closely, but Ben put out the offer for a conversation and or debate multiple times privately and then publicly, and and then publicly talked about the private invitations. And so the two of them not debating, as far as I can tell, is not because of reticence on the part of Ben Shapiro, but from what I could tell of the people who were in attendance, there was a lot of support for Ben. And I mean, I'm biased. I've very clearly drawn my line in the sand, but the people who were ragging on Ben or more in defense of Tucker, to me, seemed just like they were just less coherent. in their responses. And in some ways, I think that's representative of how it looked on stage. I mean, Ben had a very tight, prepared speech for whatever people think about it, you know, and it was obviously very, you know, like fluid and thoughtful. And Tucker essentially canned his speech, you know, right when he got onto stage, because he was and made it a response to Ben instead. And so, yeah, I mean, and I think they even did some polling of the attendees there, and it was something like a split, and maybe with higher support for Ben than Tucker.
Okay.
And now
when
so Ben was the first person to speak at AmFest right after Erica Kirk.
Yeah.
And he got what sounded like a roaring applause from the audience, and there was a lot of support for him, and that was very heartening for me to see. I think a lot of people were kind of holding their breath, because we see things online and we get little bits of polling, or we get little anecdotes of people like Rod Dreyer who are, you know, saying, oh, this amount of people and staffers have these, you know, dissident views and whatnot. So it was interesting to see what it actually looked like. The people who, I mean, there was 30,000 people in attendance, right?
Yeah.
And it does seem like the split is definitely real, but it's not as skewed as you would be led to believe online. Yeah. And so that was heartening to me.
Yeah. And I definitely think it said something that Erica put him up like right after her. You know, he was like the first person to speak.
Yep.
And whether, you know, I don't think that's insignificant, you know. Like it appears to be that she is saying something without coming out and saying it, you know.
Totally. I think that's significant as well. And in some ways, like, it set Ben, not that I think it was a setup, but like in some ways, especially because he came out, you know, swinging, everyone gets to respond to Ben, right? So he's also like sort of put in that position. But no one had to take the bait, if you want to call it that. Like, if you want to be as cynical as possible, no one had to respond like that. And yeah, I think it's definitely says something that Ben was made the first speaker right after Erica, especially because so many people were commenting. I mean, it's so silly. All of this stuff is just so online and very high school in so many ways. And I want to talk about Megyn Kelly and just how high school she has really been in all of this.
Yes.
But
that has been
there
my
were
main
like
critique. Yes.
Yeah, me too. And it's just very upsetting. And we will get there in a second. But there were so many people making much to do about the AmFest speaker poster like a week in advance. And, you know, Tucker is like right up there on the top line, and like Ben is down below. And then it's, you know, and everyone wanted to make so much of that, like as if that is like their order of their favorites or something. And then Ben gets given, you know, the opening speech to AmFest. And I was heartened too. I feel like a lot of people who have, I think a lot of people spoke out. Again, we're talking about online, but a lot of people online chimed in to show their support of Ben after that speech. So that was great. And Ben did call out by name Candace, which is nothing new, and Tucker, which is nothing new. He had spoken explicitly about Tucker the night before as well on the Heritage Foundation.
Okay.
And he also called out Megyn Kelly.
Oh. On you're frozen again, Tali.
Sorry, I don't know what's happening.
No, it's okay.
My Wi-Fi is not even showing up as like as low or anything, so I don't know what's happening. But yeah, so Ben called out Megyn Kelly by name. Yeah. And this was the first time that he had like sniped at her in that way. Directly. And she snapped. I mean, she made her into most of her conversation with Jack Posobiec, who is a real cretin, as far as I'm concerned. She made most of that conversation a response to Ben in what I perceived it as a very catty manner. I mean, she literally was in the clip saying, that she made Ben Shapiro. No one even knew who he was until she brought him on to her Fox News show.
Yeah.
And that she so generously, she basically made it seem like bringing him on her tour that she just did, her podcast tour, was a favor to him. You know, he's losing subscribers fast, and I spoke nicely about him for 10 minutes, like as if she has been as if it was all a personal favor to him.
Yeah.
And she was pretty indignant about being called out by him, and I can partially understand, or at least like the best, I guess, like that stings to be called out by your friend. And she makes the point, you know, he calls me his friend. He said my friend Megyn Kelly, and then he proceeded to call her a coward. True. Like all true. And I don't think I would take that very well either, especially if I was supposed to speak publicly. I would probably end up responding to that too. So I don't think that I'm any better than her necessarily in that way, although I hope I would be more principled. And again, there's just so much nonsense here that you have to like have been paying attention to all these like micro things for months and even years at this point. But Megyn is not innocent in this either. On this tour that she was talking about with Ben Shapiro, Ben confronted, not confronted her, but spoke about Candace Owens and spoke about, you know, about all of these things that he was concerned with. And Megyn pushed back. And then the next day on her tour, when Ben was not there to defend himself, went on stage and said, I fact checked this and it's not true. Ben lied about what he said yesterday about Candace. Candace has not specifically targeted Erica Kirk.
Yeah.
So,
but she all but had, and everybody knew, and she knew what her audience was saying, and she knew that the inferences that were being made. And she knew she was insinuating and pushing towards it. And that is clear and obvious. And it's like, I don't know, it's willful ignorance to say not. But Megyn does this thing where, like you were saying, where she says that, but also is like, but I don't watch Candace, so I don't know. And I don't want to, you know, the whole young mother thing. So it's just very, like, she has a very incoherent, defensive.
Like
her behavior,
right? And you're right. And then she went and she tried to take it, and she's doing this whole bizarre fucking thing now. So now we're all supposed to find out. The big secret was that behind the scenes, Megyn was planning this retreat, this summit between Candace and Erica, and apparently it was Erica's idea. Okay, I think it would have been a bad idea, but I understand where Erica was coming from, you know, to a certain extent. So apparently Erica asks Megyn to facilitate this, to moderate basically a debate or a conversation between the two of them that was going to be live streamed. They go back and forth. A détente. Yes. And they decide not to live stream it. They decide not to have Megyn moderate it, but the conversation goes on. And it ends with, and there are all these weird things about it. Like Candace tries to back out by saying that she can't fly to Arizona because she has a security risk. So then Erica flies to Tennessee. And they have this 4.5-hour conversation, and Candace is tweeting out, you know, that it went well and telling her followers, I'm alive, you know, just feeding into it more, that she was at some risk just meeting with Erica Kirk, because Erica Kirk is apparently dangerous to be around, and TPUSA is dangerous to be around. She's just obviously fanning these flames. And then right after that, I mean, she just goes back to accusing her, right? Even in more explicit terms than she had done before, bringing on some supposed eyewitness who claims to have seen Erica Kirk with 95% certainty that day on some military base. Like just insane shit, right? So,
but you'll notice what she did do though is that she definitely rolled back on the claim, or on her commentary of like, you should stop donating to them. She's like, yes, that was aggressive, and she admitted to it. She owned it, and she kind of rolled it back a little. She didn't say too much about it, but did that. And then afterwards, so I'm not sure, but that to me sounds like it was communicated like legally, you know what I mean? Like,
right,
you can't do that. You're affecting our bottom line. You know what I mean? Like libel and defamation. And I think it also worked in Erica's favor to have met with her, to put her on notice. You know, now they have a record of that. And so it looks like she was kind of rolling that back, and then her bringing other people on, whoever else that was, to make claims that maybe she herself did not want to make, is potentially going to be part of her way around it, like letting other people come do the talking, and then she herself.
But it's such bullshit. She's making the claims because she brings them on and then says that I verified this. I had to vet this. So she's just giving her seal of approval, and then she goes beyond that. I mean, but no, you're right. And she walked that one thing back, and as you pointed out, she didn't. She walked it back by saying, all right, that was a little OD, like I got a little crazy there, that was a little dramatic. I don't mean exactly that. She didn't do anything to like bestow trust in the organization. And like, I mean, I don't know how much trust I have in the organization either, but I'm not Candace, and I didn't tell people to pull their money out and all of this stuff. I definitely don't think that they're stealing people's money or doing anything wrong with it. I just don't know if it's an organization that aligns with my values, that I would want to work with or anything like that.
I wouldn't pull the money away from it thinking that they killed Charlie.
Right.
So that's
or
like
that had anything to do with his death or the aftermath of his death.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Megan is just I'm annoyed. I'm sad. I feel like an idiot because I spent a lot of time defending her too. I mean, one of the only episodes up on my YouTube channel is between me and Noam Dwarman, and we were talking about Megyn Kelly, and I was like really trying this was in September, I think, and I was really trying to give her the benefit of the doubt and saying like maybe she doesn't watch Candace, and like, and I was even saying like people do clip everyone out of context. So maybe she has actually seen clips of Candace that were out of context, and then someone shows her more maybe she really is only seeing certain parts of it. And Megan kind of goes with that, like you're saying, Megan says, oh, I barely watch her, I barely know her, whatever. But no, in the recent days and weeks, she basically said, actually, while you guys were pressuring me to condemn her, I've actually gotten close with her. We've gotten even closer in the last several months. And, turning to the camera and telling her audience to fuck off. And now going into Vanity Fair for an interview that's just total backlash against Ben and Barry Weiss to say that Jews are making anti-Semites, basically. That the people complaining about Tucker Carlson are creating anti-Semites, not Tucker Carlson.
Yeah.
So Candace walked it back. Yeah.
Yeah. Candace walked it back on the show right after, on the show that she had right after she met with Erica, just on the pulling your donations thing, and pretty much everything else was a no-go. And a lot of her followers, like, through temper tantrums, her comments were like out of control against her. And then the next day she came back and put on Jewish music and made fun of being a like Mossad agent or target, what I mean, like in cahoots with them. And yeah, it was fun to watch.
Yeah. And I think like, there's so many things to address here. There's all the micro things that I do want to talk about because, it's like girl gossip. It's like part of my DNA is to just, talk shit about this stuff. But on the macro level too, this is something that I've been thinking about for a while, and I'm far from the first person to bring it up. It's not an original thought, but there is a crisis on the right of people some people who are actually sort of triggered and traumatized from the cancel culture era, and other people who are just taking advantage of people's hesitancy there, where now you're not allowed to disagree with people publicly lest you be accused of trying to censor or cancel them. And I think one of the most egregious examples of this is like Megan, who was so unwilling. She was just biting her tongue so unwilling to condemn any of the things that Candace had said. And it's like, okay, first of all, you should be upset the Erica thing was the easiest thing for her to pick up and condemn, you know, like, because it's not topical about the Jews, and like supposedly Charlie was like your best friend, Megan, and all of this stuff. So that would have been the easiest place. You could have like left it if you want to make your podcast a safe space for Israel skeptical people and JQers, you could have left open your condemnation of Candace there and just gone after her for the Erica thing, but she didn't. But it's like, so what's your excuse now? Now we know that you are plugged into Candace. You actually talk to Candace. You and her have become, you know, closer. Now what's your excuse? When she's opening up her show with klezmer music, right? And she's calling Ben belly people and the what
holding up the Talmud
and there was another fucking word she was using.
Yeah.
She would make Louis Farrakhan blush. Like she's just literally regurgitating Nazi propaganda, Nation of Islam propaganda. There's some Hebrew Israelite stuff in there, but NOI and BHI kind of overlap in a lot of those things. But Candace is just like literally the preeminent American anti-Semite at this point, and Megan has nothing to say about any of it.
Yeah, and I think, it's been interesting to watch Megan. Just, it's like she's so reflexively contrarian. Like, I suggest you do this, I will not do this. In such an immature way that has created this like dilemma, if you will, for herself, where she is seemingly going against everything she has stood for and all of her morals and ethics, and just running like head first into this fucking, I don't know, like this I don't know, this fucking cesspool fire or whatever it is, and refuses to like zoom out and be like, what am I doing? And it's like interesting to watch, because she's like a grown-ass woman. I think she's 55. She's acting like a teenager. She's acting so immature that it's almost,
oh my God,
almost, it is embarrassing to be like, you're
so embarrassing.
It's very cringe. You're 55. You're telling people to fuck off if they don't like your show, how you're running things.
If they're trying to hold you to moral standards that you set out for yourself and others.
But and refusing completely to engage in the criticisms that they're leveling at you. I keep hearing people say, well, we're not allowed to talk about it. What do you mean you're not allowed to talk about it? Because everybody who is saying we're not allowed to talk about it is talking about it all the fucking time. So what are you not allowed to talk about? They're not like, it makes no sense. You're allowed to criticize Israel. And if there are some people who think sick that is anti-Semitic,
no one is criticizing Israel though, but that's and you're right. But
even if there are, and there's a few people who are calling you anti-Semitic, fuck that. Who cares?
Fuck
if you know you're not,
then those are the idiots.
It doesn't matter. Who cares? Like, you're allowed to criticize what you want to criticize. No one's stopping you. No one's censoring you. No one's calling for you to be deplatformed or canceled or whatever for that. That's not happening. Like, that's just not what is happening. So I don't understand what this issue is. People are saying, why aren't you addressing some of these audacious like claims that Candace is making of the widow, I don't know how it is, but like of Charlie Kirk's wife, who you are now accusing of being in on his murder. Why aren't you saying anything about that? Why aren't you saying anything against that? Why aren't you calling that out? And Megan's like, well, I'm working behind the scenes and you don't know. You don't get to have like, you don't get the like, I don't know, the character praise or whatever for the things you're doing behind the scenes. The things you're doing privately, you don't get public recognition for. Right. I don't know like how to explain that to you, but you don't just get to say like, trust me, bro.
Yeah, like, and listen, and Yeah, and there are so many like layers to this, and there's like the micro and the macro. There's like this meta thing that I want to talk about, and we should talk about at some point, which is like the process of like, what do you do if someone that you love really dearly is like going down not that I think Megan fucking loves Candace really dearly, but let's just pretend that she did or whatever, because there are other examples of this. Let's say her relationship with Tucker, for example, where I think they actually have a friendship and whatever. But like, what do you do if someone that you love dearly and that you are very publicly associated with starts saying shit that's really bad? Now, I agree. You should not just be expected to denounce them. First of all, you can still love people and criticize their views and what they're saying and what they're doing. And I think that's like reasonable and normal. And like all of us in like this like hyper polarized time should be able to acknowledge that. We have this within our own families and friend groups, theoretically. But what is the responsibility? And I think it's an open question. Like, okay, so yes, you don't need to denounce them publicly. And in theory, you're working privately. You're trying to get through to them. You're trying to open their mind. You're trying to challenge some of their beliefs. What do you do if they don't change their mind? When are you supposed to speak publicly? You know, and in some ways, this question played out with Ben and Megan, right? And with the Megan and Candace example, it's like, okay, you were doing it behind the scenes. Even if I like wanted to give her all of the credit for that, like, fine. Like maybe I wouldn't go that way, but like I understand the thought process of like maybe we can handle this without the drama behind the scenes, whatever. And also I think it's true that had Megan come out swinging at Candace, that Megan wouldn't have been able to play intermediary there. Now I think that was probably more self-involved on Megan's part than she would like to admit. I think she wanted to be able to be the mediator, right? She was more concerned about having access to both sides in that sense.
You wanted the aesthetic of the peacemaker.
Yes, right. But where is it acceptable? And I'll use an example that I don't know if like our listeners here will be like tuned into, but Benjamin Boyce, who I think you were also
I watched
a fan of his?
Yeah, I had watched a bunch of his conversations.
Yeah, me too. And basically he was the person who did the Evergreen State College like documentary. Basically he did like a 15-part docu-series on YouTube, and it's great. And like it really encompasses everything that went so crazy and so broken, and it came before peak woke, you know. And I found his stuff several years later, and when I got into sort of like my anti-woke stuff, and he has like just a giant catalog of conversations with detransitioners and trans people and trans researchers and sexologists and a lot of the stuff that I was interested in. And I was on his show once too. And he was also broadly interested in politics, and he was spending a couple of years interviewing what was then known as like the dissident right. And now I think we're kind of saying like post-liberal. I mean, there are different variations within this group, but Ben was interviewing a lot of these people. Dave Green, you know, Carl Benjamin. And I found all that stuff really interesting. I feel naive now, and I've changed my mind about some of these things now, but I was also intrigued by the sort of transgressive nature of some of these more hard right politics, and at least the conversation. And so this is like not new for Ben. Ben has been dealing with these ideas for several years now, but since October 7th, like a lot of people, for Benjamin Boyce, this progressed to like this weird Jewish question stuff, you know, that gets to be framed around Israel, even though it's not. And so Ben's been kind of off the deep end as far as I'm concerned, really since October 7th. And it's been very sad. And I still follow him, and like, but I don't know, he's kind of drawn his lines in the sand.
Yeah.
And he married this woman, Leslie. Sorry, I'm just droning on here, but he married this woman, Leslie.
Yes, no, I know. I used to watch her shows, and
me too.
They used to hold these little group sessions and stuff like that, like a peer support or peer talking group for like people in
disaffected.
Disaffected.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And his wife Leslie is a therapist, and she came out talking about kind of the wokeness in therapy and in graduate school and stuff like that. And I guess a clip went out from one of Benjamin put out a conversation like a couple days ago with some anonymous online person. And in it, Benjamin's going on about how he read this one book about, you know, the JQ that like gives him nightmares at night. Like he didn't want to know the truth, but now he knows the truth about the power of the Jews and how, you know, their mission to subvert Christian society. And someone clips this and it goes online. And it's not surprising to me at all because I know that this is how he's been going. But anyway, I guess people were tagging his wife and getting upset with his wife, and that is unfair. Like I don't know, sorry, I'm trying to tie this back to our conversation about what do you do when someone in your personal life is going off the rails, right? And I saw this Jewish woman who I have no idea who she is. I'm assuming she's Jewish because she had like the yellow ribbon in her bio, but she basically came out and made an announcement on Twitter, you know, like anyone who is like trying to hold Leslie accountable for her husband's views, like should really stop this right now. Like I've known Leslie for several years. She's never been anything but a, you know, warm, thoughtful, courageous, blah, blah, blah person. She's not responsible for what her husband says. And like, we don't know what efforts she's been trying to take, you know, behind the scenes. And that much I agree with. We don't know what she's been trying to do behind the scenes. And I do not expect anyone to come out and condemn their spouse online. I certainly do not expect that.
No.
And Leslie responded to that post by saying like, you know, thank you, whatever. And basically said, I don't watch Benjamin's podcast. He doesn't watch mine. You know, like we focus on our family and like the things that we share in common because we realized early on that we don't agree on some of that stuff. And I get that. Mm-hmm. And that's reasonable. And I do think couples should be able to have different political views. I don't know how you deal with a partner who like has bought into the JQ. So I'm just like, where, and again, I'm like, I don't want to hold, and by the way, I'm not tweeting at Leslie, you know, like I haven't involved myself in any of this. I'm just kind of talking about it here, but I'm like, what do we do with that response even? Because it doesn't sound like, and not that I would expect her to say, yes, behind the scenes, I'm working to cure my husband of his anti-Semitism. I don't expect that either, but I'm not entirely content with, well, we agree to disagree about some stuff. Like, yes, it was following his podcast with Rhetorically Defective, Zero Fucks. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not entirely surprising. I don't know. Like I could see they haven't been married long. They didn't know each other for a long time before they got married. She was a single mom to her, I think her kids are more grown, so they're not little. And I can just see this not being like something you know how to deal with. Do you know what I mean? So I have some empathy for her there. I guess I'm unsure. Like I would have to see because he was just on her podcast or her show like not too long ago, and he keeps popping. He used to pop in there fairly regularly on the Radical Center or whatever it was. So it would depend on, you know what I mean? Like if that's still happening all the time, then maybe less of a problem with it. Do you know what I mean? But doesn't want to be a public, but doesn't want to come out publicly and say these things because understands the backlash. But I'm not entirely certain. I used to really enjoy her show also, but it just became a little more puritanical on like sexuality than I could handle.
Yeah.
For I don't know, in a way that felt I don't know, it was just like moralizing for not for like betterment of society, but just like for the sake of, I don't know, for the sake of like othering people, you know what I mean? And and the conversations around it just became less intellectual, and I don't know. So I kind of like stepped back from that. So which is
it wasn't
bad,
so conscious. It wasn't so conscious for me, but I also took a step back. And again, I don't know why I didn't make a conscious decision to. I guess I just like had less interest in her content, but I also used to watch regularly when she was doing like that sort of panel show with the other like there were a couple women basically in a panel show that she was doing. I used to watch that, and then I kind of lost interest. But yeah, I don't know, like So again, it's just an open question, and I don't have an answer, and I don't think there is one answer. But this is tricky, and I'm seeing now these posts, and I don't want to jump on them and take them too seriously because I don't know how much to believe. But I've now seen in the past couple of days like 2 posts from people online who are claiming that their significant other has been like radicalized by this. There was someone claiming to be a man online. We never fucking know, right? People are anonymous.
Saying that his wife,
saying that his wife like is, a big Candace follower, and now his wife is just basically an anti-Semite, and he's not condemning his wife, but he's like expressing frustration, with Candace basically.
Yeah.
And then I saw a woman saying that her husband had been radicalized by Tucker. She might have said someone else also. Tucker and Nick. I don't know, maybe just Tucker. But so this is like an open question. This is something just, again, interesting of like, how are people supposed to deal with loved ones? And not just, so there's maybe 2 questions here. How do you deal with like how publicly, how do you deal with it, and privately, how do you deal with it? Like morally, right? How do you stay grounded to your morals and your principles without like just cutting people off or whatever, or condemning people? And then also, what is the most effective way to like, keep people from going over the edge? And I think part of I'm so sorry I'm rambling so much, Kay, but I think part of the thing is like, getting into the conversation of like, how is it most effective? Is a contentious one too, because then we have to a certain extent, put morals aside and just speak pragmatically, right? So like, for example, hounding people even righteously like is not effective. And then you have the people like turning around like Megyn Kelly again and saying like, well, the Jews are causing this backlash of anti-Semitism, and she's wrong, and that it's wrong to say, and I disavow that, right? I think that it's victim blaming, it's all the things. And also, if people are going to respond in the way that Megyn is responding, how do we try to get to people more effectively? Even if it's not fair how she's responding, and it's not right, and it's not principled, and it's not true, if that is how people are responding, and people do. And again, I'm so sorry, I'm going to stop right after this. But when do we just say like, well, this person kind of sucks? Yeah. And again, doesn't mean throw them away, but like, okay, well, maybe this person's just a moral coward then at a certain point, and
for sure, like we that's fine. I think we can say that. I don't know. I think people keep saying I'm being asked to denounce so-and-so. I don't know. Maybe you're just being asked to denounce their idea. You don't have to throw them away as a person. You can just say, and you don't even have to, like, these people. So this is the thing. These people are professional communicators. Yeah. They're professional communicators. So it's like, I don't believe that they can't figure out a way to communicate. I don't hold that idea. I don't agree with that idea. And I find that there is something morally troubling with that idea, or politically ineffective with that idea, or it goes against my values, or I think it's stupid, whatever. It could be anything. I don't believe that they don't know how to
finesse something like that.
How to say that, because they're, like I said, they're professional communicators. They're communicating with their audience, and that's what they've been doing for years. So there's a very easy way to say, like, I don't agree with this. You don't need to use anybody's name. You could keep it vague in some way.
But Megyn actually,
but Megyn, yes. So Megyn didn't do that. She not only didn't do that, is that she used language that aligned herself continually with Candace, either by the young mother thing, or the I'm not the
mother of the internet,
the mother of the internet, and I favored her asking these questions. And
then on stage she said that she's not the daddy of the internet too. The whole thing was so weird. She was trying to like emasculate Ben.
And she wants me to be his parent and like for me to be a child. Yeah, it's just I don't know. So, but she knows how to communicate.
Well, and on that point, because you were saying you don't even need to use names, but actually Meghan is very adept at using names and still being extremely civil while drawing clear delineations between her perspectives and beliefs and other people that she respects. And that's something that I really appreciated about her. And I brought this up in my conversation with Noam too, is like, I've always appreciated, as someone who was watching the Megyn Kelly show, her podcast every day for a while, I really appreciated that she would bring on people, liberals, you know, or even like lefties, who she clearly disagreed with, but liked, respected, and you could see the congeniality between them, and it warmed my heart, you know, like, and she could still draw, like, you know, she would have Jake Tapper on, and she would take him to task for all of these things that she very specifically had issue with, and then, you know, wish him and his family or what, you know, whatever, and talk about the next time they're going to get to meet, right? Because they clearly had like a real relationship. So she's actually quite adept at doing that. And part of this now, the difference here is this bizarre no enemies to the right thing. And it's not even to the right, it's just sort of like on the right. It's like you're never allowed to pick a fight with someone who's vaguely on the right or classifies themselves as on the right. Because again, she has no problem doing this with people who are on the left. And she said as much. She has said as much.
More on the right now, because she's doing it to Ben. She started doing it to Barry, who would consider herself more, I think, more center. You know, Barry Weiss, but has definitely moved, I guess, what would be perceived as further right over the last, like, say, like 5 to 10 years, right?
Yes,
she had no problem going after Barry, like, pretty
viciously.
Saying all kinds of things about the questions that were asked and how they were put, as if those questions weren't vetted with Erica first. That was a town, yes, but like, it was very clearly the parameters were set. There were, you know what I mean? I don't think anything came as a surprise to Erica, and I don't think it was meant to look like it was, you know, completely random.
It wasn't.
It was very clearly like a very produced episode that was going to happen and be filmed and put out. It wasn't meant to be like, here are some random people from the crowd asking questions that we would like. No, that wasn't, you know, I don't think Erica even, you know,
and
with that.
And also, like, they were framing it as if Barry set Erica up for this, as if like Barry stands in opposition to Erica and was waiting for this gotcha. We'll talk about the Barry Weiss derangement too, but Barry, Hunter's question in so many ways, speaking of just us all being so online, Hunter's question was just straight out of the Destiny Wick debate sphere, right? Where everyone on the left, the online left, in our little sphere that we're all in, turned their thing to, when will the president turn his rhetoric down? You know, I won't condemn until the president condemns, and that's what Hunter went out there and did. And frankly, it was cringe. You know, he was like,
she gave him
right. He was like, don't you think that you should tell the president to bring down the rhetoric?
Yes, and like, how dare she? Yeah, and she let him.
She handled it. Right. And she handled it. Exactly. And also, like, Erica is not a wilting flower, and she's not asking to be treated that way. And she wants to take on these she sees this as her responsibility to finish out Charlie's calendar and his obligations for the rest of the year. And so the framing of Barry Weiss and all this, it makes me fucking sick, because you're right, Barry's a centrist. She's not really on the right, but in the weird political realignment that we've had in the 2020s, basically, Barry's center right. And frankly, Barry opened up the Overton window a ton in respectable, within the liberal mainstream. Barry moved the Overton window to the right a ton. And people, I mean, it's just to spit on her like this and act like she's some and this is also too Barry Weiss derangement. So the people on the right, the Megyn Kellys and everyone now, are just slamming. Has Barry Weiss ever been to AmFest? I don't remember Barry Weiss being a part of Turning Point USA. You know, Barry Weiss hates Trump. She's not a conservative. And then right now you have all the people on the left. Oh my God, Barry Weiss spiked the CCOT story. She's covering for the Trump administration. This woman cannot fucking win. And it really drives me bananas. But Megyn just a few fucking months ago, when the announcement was made that Barry was appointed head of CBS News and that they had purchased the Free Press, Megyn tweets out like, amazing, you know, like Barry, so well deserved, like go Barry. And I remember I was still watching her show at that point, like talked about it on her show, and was because Megan is so fucking tribal. She's just playing teams here. She was happy that Barry got this because it made people on the left mad, and she liked to see them screaming about it. And it suddenly has all just become so transparent, and it's very disappointing.
Yeah. And Megan used to consider herself an independent. She didn't want to be necessarily aligned. And I think that was better. And you can do your job better when you're not necessarily like rooting on a team. I understand. I understand why she's more aligned with the right and conservatives. And I don't necessarily think that that's wrong. It's just that it happens to coincide with like this kind of like temper tantrum, which is just, I don't know, not a great look. And I think
it all happened pretty fast, Kay. Like
I think
even like
I think that she could turn around. I think like right now, if she were to just be like, what the fuck? I think she could. And if she was like,
she won't.
It was reactive. She won't. No, but she could. Like, does she have an out? Maybe she doesn't see that she has an out. But if she were to, or anybody were to be like, I got pushed and I got reactive. And the more I got reactive, we started fighting. And then I dug my claws in because that's part of my personality. And
People would relate to that. I relate to that. Yeah.
It would be, you know, people would, you know, really appreciate that. And I don't think she would have a hard time back. And that doesn't mean she has to say like she
got everything wrong or
and like, you know, Candace is an awful human being. She can just be like, these are bad ideas and I don't support them. And I don't know why it was like hard for me to communicate that. I just felt like pushed into a corner or whatever. Whatever.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think that that's difficult, but it's some people have have more trouble than others than being wrong. So it could be, you know, who knows, but like it would gain her so much more fucking credibility if she could not even do that, but if she can just address the direct criticisms without going to these insults. And she never has, you know, handled the actual critiques or the actual comments being made about her. You know, it's all just been, fuck you, you're mad at me because I won't criticize and condemn who you want me to condemn type of thing.
Well, and it is I think there is a turning point here too, because like, again, just from watching online, like there are people like specifically conservative women who I follow online, who even just a month ago were defending Megan and saying, you know, like it's not fair for all the people who are like asking for her to condemn so-and-so and condemn so-and-so. People who were still at that point saying like, lay off Megan, this isn't fair, you know, whatever. Who in the last week or so, you know, have been asking her for clarification, you know, and taking issue and disagreeing with her publicly and taking issue with some of the things that she's been doing and saying. And she blocked a few of them.
Yeah.
So there are actual people in her audience, real people who make up, I mean, you and I are part of them, but you know, forget us, whatever, in her audience who are upset by this and are changing the way they view her and not wanting to interact with her with her stuff anymore. And the replies to those people are "shut up, Jew." Those are the replies now in Megan.
Okay, not by her though.
Not by Megan, but these are the new people who are in her comment sections. These are the people who are coming to defend Megan now. Just literally explicitly, shut up, Jew. You don't control this conversation anymore. And by the way, these women that I'm talking about are Christian women. They're they're explicitly not Jewish women. But they're very clear-eyed on what they see as, you know, this scourge of anti-Jewish hatred rising on the right.
I think, you know, when I look at how it all happened, like, was there a better way for Ben to like come out and call her out and like not call, like before he called her out, I guess it's like Amfest kind of called her out without naming her. Maybe did he? I'm not sure. Or he was talking about it or talking around it. maybe that was more about Tucker and Candace. I'm not entirely sure.
Right.
Is there a better way to do that? Could
she fucking called him a liar? That's the thing too. I'm just so pissed about the lying of the order of events here. So, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but then frankly,
could there have been anything like? And that's not.
But his point. But his point. Sorry, his point, and it was part of Noam's point, even though I think Noam's taking it too far, as you and I talked about before we got on stream. His point is, I think, if he were to do that, then he would be guilty of exactly what he's saying, which is allowing friendship or perceived friendship, whatever, to come before speaking clearly, and taking clear moral stances. I get what you're saying. Like he didn't need to literally say her name. He could have even just said, the people who are going to be speaking here tonight, right? And left it more open-ended.
Oh yeah. And I just think that there's like, if you're upset with what she's doing, like you can talk to her about it behind the scenes before you decide to.
She fucking called him a liar.
She could, and he could still have reached out and had a conversation with her. And he could have, maybe it would have given him more information. Maybe that doesn't mean he doesn't go public and talk about it, but maybe you try, and that doesn't mean that friendship prevents you from then saying something. Like you can maybe understand where somebody's coming from, and you don't have to like not say the thing after, but you could try and get an idea of like what they're seeing, if you have into them. I just don't think that trying to get, I don't know, more information or more of an understanding on how somebody's mind is working to be like a bad idea usually. No, I understand that why this doesn't happen. I know people don't like to text because, everyone's worried about, especially about certain types of things. People aren't going to be super vulnerable. They're worried about things getting leaked or like, so I understand that might not be, something that's like possible, but
I
don't know. Like I is it effective? That's like, I always come down to like this, like, autistic way of looking at it. Like, but is it effective and does it work?
Yeah.
And what do we do for it to work? What is the most, what is the most effective way to have these discussions? What is the most effective way to talk with these people? What are the reasons or the causes people are doing the things that they're doing? Because I don't think any of the solutions work if you're like, there's many different types of solutions, but you have to apply the right one, So it's just kind of like, I don't know. That's not to say that Ben was doing anything like wrong, but it's just something I could ask myself. I don't want to be too reflexively in his camp that I'm not like, know what I mean? Like looking at him like, okay, well, was this the best way? Was it not the best way? It feels good to see.
It feels good.
And so whenever it feels good, I have to like, it's good to really
check.
It's like, oh
yeah.
But I don't think what her response was, I don't know.
Her response was way worse.
He was just like there to facilitate.
If he did a low blow,
talk, like without, he didn't add much,
If Ben did a low blow by naming Megan on stage, then Megan went into the gutter in her response to Ben on stage. And no, you're right. And like, I'll back up a little because I did start it this way. Like, you called her out. You said my friend Megan Kelly, and then proceeded to call her a coward. And that was that was just obviously on no planet, in no universe was that going to be taken as like, oh, that's all right, difference of opinion, my good buddy. She was going to be upset by that. And again, I would go on and want to respond to that. So I get that urge too. I guess where I'm coming from is like, but Megan's behavior is actually that egregious. Yeah. And she didn't seem very, again, it's like they have this discussion on her tour and then he texts her saying that their friendship is important. And then she goes out the next day and says, Ben lied to everyone, by the way. That's not even true she didn't say Ben lied, but she said it was 100% factually incorrect, that she went and fact checked it and it was not true what he said. So yeah, I hear you. And listen, I am concerned about what is effective. Like,
yeah. And I don't know. I don't have the answer. It's just like, good to ask, right? You know, because
Yeah.
like if we want to talk about like last night, Noam had Josh Hammer on
Yeah.
the Comedy Cellar. What's it called? Yeah.
Live from the Table podcast.
Live from the Table. Yeah. I like Noam and I like his show. And there's been like, I don't know, he's had some great like guests and conversations over the last like couple years. And
2 years at least.
But done before that, but like at least in the last little while, for sure. I don't know. I was under the impression that when he was talking to Josh, because Josh has been feuding with Megan, and Noam has been upset and disappointed with Megan and very against Candace, and as has Josh, and on and on.
And Tucker.
That this was going to be not a contentious conversation. I did not think it was going to be I don't want to say a struggle session because it wasn't that, but like, just, I did not think it was going to be that spicy. I don't think
either of them did either. And so basically where things really blew up in their conversation is Noam's focus was, yes, Megan and Tucker and Candace and specifically their directed ire at Josh Hammer and all of this stuff. But Noam wanted to make the larger point about affinity for conspiracy theories and how he sees that as really destroying the right and as like a particular issue, a particular vulnerability on the right is people who are susceptible to conspiratorial thinking. And in doing so, he named specific people and specific scenarios that he believes to be conspiracy theories, basically. And in doing so, he named Dinesh D'Souza, who is a good friend of Josh Hammer's. And Noam, I saw in like some posting after the show, Noam had no idea they were friends. So when Noam raised this, he was not making a dig at Josh. Like he was just I think he basically thought that Josh would just agree essentially that these were all issues and whatever. And Josh didn't. Josh was defensive of his friend and also defended his friend's stances basically, or didn't basically said there was there essentially.
That's interesting. I assumed that he used Dinesh
specifically as an example
because he was a friend, because they were talking, because the whole conversation was about not wanting to call out people you were friends with. So that was that's what I had like just assumed when I was watching, because that would have made sense to me. That would have been like appropriate.
And it did fit in because like you're saying, so Noam wanted to make the point about 2 points that he's been railing on that are, I think, true, just objectively true, that the right has a real problem with conspiratorial thinking. And Noam's point was that it's not. Noam was trying to make the point. It's not just, it's the Pizzagate and the 2020 election being stolen and the birther lie. He's saying that it's all of these conspiracy theories that brought us to where we are. Is Noam's point. And in his mind, and maybe kind of what Josh was saying is like, well, no, basically some of these are different. These people are bad and wrong, but some of the other stuff was okay or whatever. Now, but so I believe Noam. I have no reason to think that Noam was lying. He said after that he had no idea they were friends. And again, to him, Dinesh is just an example in Noam's mind of a crazy conspiracy theorist. And I have not, like, I didn't follow Dinesh very closely. I kind of knew of him as like a kind of a kooky guy. I haven't read any of his books or anything like that. I'd seen like several interviews and like debates that he had done throughout the years. So I know he's a kooky guy, but he was taken seriously by plenty of intellectual people and, and plenty of reasonable, thoughtful people. And I noticed that since this fallout on the right, Dinesh has taken up for the Jewish people. He has come out, swinging in defense of Israel and the Jewish people and Western civilization and what he sees as the connection between those things. And so I would have made that similar point that Josh did to Noam. And because I kind of made that point to Noam about Charlie Kirk. Noam and I were speaking about it. Noam was very upset about Charlie Kirk kind of pushing the idea that there was some type of stand down order on October 7th.
Yeah.
And I made the point to know, like, well, yeah, no, and that's not good, and I don't agree with that, and and yeah, that is conspiratorial thinking, and yes, I do think Charlie, like many people on the right, was vulnerable to conspiratorial thinking, but I said to Noam, Charlie was just the greatest defender of the Jews in the modern era, just by far on the right, at least, and so I have all this admiration for him for that. And I do feel that way about Dinesh on a much smaller level, frankly. But I'm like, wow, I have admiration. I appreciate this guy. I always appreciate non-Jews who speak out on behalf of the Jews, because I feel like you have absolutely nothing to gain. The $7,000 checks are not real, believe it or not. So all you have to gain is like a lot of hatred online, and the respect of some Jews privately.
But if there is a $7,000 payment, my PayPal is linked in the description, and you can just send it to me.
I'll put my Venmo at the end. Yeah.
Okay.
But so I would have made a similar argument to Noam that Josh did about Dinesh. But Noam made a good counterpoint, which is, how is this any different than what we're talking about here with Tucker and Megan about the corruption of relationships?
Yeah.
And Noam's right about that.
He is.
But I do wish there was a more artful way for him to because so much of conversation, and maybe I think about this as someone who was a therapist, because that's what I did before whatever my current career. And in therapy, a lot of what you have to do when you're thinking about the way that you're responding to the person that you're speaking to is you need to be aligned. They need to feel that you are on their team. It doesn't mean that you affirm everything they say, that you cheer on all of their behaviors, like none of that. Yeah. But they need to feel like you're working with them. You know what I mean? And that you want the best.
Yeah.
Exactly. There needs to be some alignment there. And that, I think, is where it really all fell apart. And I do think Noam tried at different parts to realign, because they do obviously agree on a ton, but Noam didn't give much room. I don't know where to place a lot of the blame. I do feel like, especially in the aftermath, that Noam is swinging a lot harder than Josh is.
Yeah.
But it's hard for me to argue with his
yeah, he can be right
core
and
points,
just be wrong about how he's going about it. And I think that that's kind of what it is. He opened with it, and it was very contentious immediately. I understand now that he did not realize that there was a friendship there, but it would have been maybe as an interviewer or as somebody who's hosting somebody onto his show, and that was going to be an opening question. That might be something you want to, and Noam's very researched, so it's hard for you know what I mean? To make sure about first, and maybe do a little bit more rapport building before you get into something like that. And because there wasn't any rapport built, and they don't seem to have a pre-existing relationship, and because of how Josh responded to it, so I would say it wasn't that it was such a strong response in terms of anger or anything, but he really did not you could tell, do you know what I mean? He really did not how he was being pushed on it. And that's okay. And he doesn't need to like it, and you can still keep pushing on it, but maybe you need to take the long road instead of just keeping going there, because it essentially derailed what I thought could have been a productive conversation. And there were times where they had moved off that, where Noam kind of quipped back at him oh, but you didn't like what I did too. But see, you're needlessly bringing it up now. You're moving on, and you're throwing it in as a quip, not as a okay, so it kind of felt more like a jab than a sincere well, you seem to feel this way about this, or you seem to be able to see the problem with the loyalty here, but when I was asking you about that, you didn't want to address it. Do you know what I mean? It felt like a little bit antagonistic at that point. And if that's the kind of interview he wanted to have, then fine, that's okay, you can do that. But if he wanted to have more of a productive conversation, then he definitely I don't know that he got there. You know what I mean? Because I don't know how open Josh was to be giving. You know, like he seemed to be willing to talk, but he didn't. I don't know. Like
Josh is very dry. I mean, Zero Fox just wrote, that's Noam's sense of humor, but it didn't match Josh's. And I think that's right. And like, I don't think Noam was joking, but Noam is the type of like, it could stay light. Like you could disagree, right? And he could make that jab, which is kind of a jab, but doesn't need to be taken personally so much, right? Like it could be given back. Noam would very happily take it back type of thing, right? Josh is just, no, Josh is very dry. I mean, and I'm going to talk to Noam about this. I consider Noam a friend. I mean, I'm sure that's an exaggeration. I'm not very important in his life, but he's someone that I speak to and I have a tremendous amount of respect for. And so I'm going to talk to him about this. But yeah, I like part of me when watching it, like thought like, maybe Noam is doing this like so that he'll have some street cred of like, look, I push back against my side too, almost like which I actually don't think that was it at all. I don't think it was some calculated thing at all. But like that was how contentious it was. I thought I was like, okay, now at least he gets to frame this as like because people give him shit for pulling up clips and like quote unquote trying to hold other people accountable for their friends' words, where again, I think frankly what Noam is trying to do, and he's only come to articulate it so clearly and beautifully even more recently, is really highlight the corruption of personal relationships in the space of ideas, and again, he ended up like accidentally stepping on that with Josh, which I don't think was supposed to be the focus of it, but it came around to it, right? When there was this wall in the conversation around Dinesh D'Souza. And the whole thing broke down, and then I thought it ended off okay, and then it just kind of like it's been lit up on Twitter after, which I find disappointing. I don't know. It's like I'm not a fan of Josh Hammer. I really only came to know him since he's been involved in some of this drama and all the people like calling him out and putting a target on him. But I mean, I'm certainly a much bigger fan of Noam Torman than Josh Hammer, but yeah, it got very hostile.
Yeah, it felt. Yeah, I wasn't quite expecting that, so it was a bit of a bummer. And then yes, on Twitter or X or whatever it is, I'm not entirely sure what they're exactly arguing over. I couldn't quite follow the argument, but he seemed to be, I don't know, pushing it. Josh is like done and doesn't want to argue, I guess, now at this point. So who knows? Maybe once everybody like, chills out and things kind of like cool down, they can have a conversation. It was just it's kind of like an unfortunate, at least that's how I, because I could have been more interesting.
No,
I'm not like, I don't know much about Josh, so I can't really say either way. It just came off like he was quite spicy, and I was like, oh, that's fine, but like it depends what you're going for, right?
Yeah, right, and especially someone who doesn't know you and whatever. And yeah, I mean, but it leaves open a question that I think is important. Well, there's lots of questions here that strings to pick up, but it's a conversation that I want to have amongst right of center people, because it's simply the most obnoxious conversation to be had with people on the left, because they are so unwilling to even contend with the ways that the left contributed so significantly to where the right finds itself today. So having these conversations with people on the left, I mean, they just want to dunk. Like I made a comment on Twitter the other day in response to someone else of like, there are a lot of people who voted for Trump, who, didn't sign up for all of this stuff, and I had the people who I met through Pisco's audience and stuff like that commenting like, this is a surprise to you that the right was like, filled with a bunch of crazy, hateful bigots. And it's like, yes. Like, did I know that element always existed? Sure. The left has crazy fucking elements too, by the way. Super hateful, bigoted, insane fucking elements, right? So get off your high horse. But like, and also I feel like I'm being gaslit because like, even though that element existed, it simply was not as big or as prominent as it is today. Like that also is just like ignoring reality to a certain extent. But so it's not a conversation that will be fruitful with people on the left because they just want to dunk. It's not even very fruitful with a certain segment of the never Trumpers who just want to dunk. But I think there are never Trump Republicans and other vaguely right of center people who need to have a conversation about how we got here.
Yeah.
Because again, it's like if we can talk without the lefties in the room, right? Because we all acknowledge like and Josh tried to bring this up and it's frustrating because I know they agree about this. This is the frustrating thing too, is like Noam's been a defender of free speech and a keynote speaker for FIRE and stuff for years, right? And understands the role, like the role of like loss of trust in the institutions and like how that came to be and the censorious nature of our institutions and all this stuff. So Noam gets that.
Yeah.
But so it's like, okay, yeah, so we can acknowledge that the left was crazy and really destroyed trust in institutions, and prominent people on the right totally leaned into the conspiracism that stems from that. And it's like, and I think there's this weird thing, and I've been talking to James Lindsay a little bit about this, is like with Charlie Kirk, with Donald Trump, there's one way of looking at them, that they are the bulwark.
Yeah.
LOL, the bulwark is an anti-Trump mag, but yeah. But in some ways, these men were and are the bulwark against some of the really ugly, bigoted, hateful, whatever parts of the right. And they ushered them in. They just did. And like, does that make these people individually terrible? I don't know. Probably not. Does it mean that people are complicated? Yeah. That people are led by narcissism and ego and power? Yeah. There's actually a real problem on the right with epistemology, frankly.
That's and I think that one of the problems Noam has is like, yes, there are conspiracy theories around all of the things that he was talking about, but all of those issues that he brought up also have real problems around them that the left kind of like refuses to like acknowledge or deal with. That you can say, no, the election, the 2020, whatever, the 2020 election was not like stolen or rigged, but like maybe there were things that people thought were questionable and that were brought to people's attention that they felt questionable, and given the information that they had and how they understood things, it was reasonable for them to feel like uncertain about things. That doesn't go all the way to like the end of it, and that doesn't mean that people should be hanging on to that now necessarily, or all of those things, but there could be like a rational place for some kind of, I don't know, feelings of uncertainty about the system in general. And the same thing with the COVID stuff. Yes, there are, conspiracy theories, and there are also real questions and real concerns that people have that kind of get like hand waved away, right? So yes, there is a conspiracy theory part of it, but there is also the real kind of questions and concerns people had that kind of get like people who are the sane, rational people asking those questions get lumped in with the fucking crazy conspiracy theorists all the time. And it just, that frustrates people. So then they'll
and that's bad.
Asking this question makes me a conspiracy theory, then fucking I'll put a tinfoil hat on. People just like, words end up having no meaning, right? Because if the conspiracy, then nothing's a conspiracy. So,
and this is what I was. This is what when say when I moved to the right. It's weird, like to talk about it in those terms, because like I guess I did at some point make a conscious decision that I was going to vote for Trump, right, and like whatever.
Mhm.
And at a certain point, I recognized myself as being more on the right, certainly, than I am on the left. But like I don't think I chose to move to the right. My view of the world changed pretty significantly over several years. But when I was moving to the right, when the right moved to you, yeah, when I was moving to the right, it was for those exact reasons that you're talking about. And I've said this so many times that it's so redundant at this point, but the answer to this is to allow the responsible adults to have the conversation, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's unflattering, you know. And this is across the board. This goes for like the JQ, which again, most of that is completely illegitimate, but still adults need to be having the conversation, to things like what does it mean to be trans? What does it mean to be gay? What are IQ differences, success, all of these things like that are uncomfortable and that do bring out actual bigots and do bring out actual conspiracy theorists. If we only leave it to the freaks on the left and the right to have the conversation, then we're not getting anywhere. And so when I was moving to the right, I thought that I was voting for a colorblind meritocracy, right? Where the way to regain trust in institutions is not to tear them down, but to make everything radically transparent, right? You know, because it's an epistemological problem, right? And the left was inserting politics into institutions that relied on that people believed, that people put their trust in, right? And believed that there was some type of essentially scientific method going into these decisions, right? And some rigorous examination. And it turns out that wasn't true in a lot of different domains, or it wasn't always true, wasn't entirely true, or there were parts that had been tampered with, right? Or messages that had been edited in paternalistic ways or in explicitly political ways. And so the mistrust of institutions is real and valid. But there's also, I don't know, man. I don't know, because I feel that distrust. And also not that I'm holier than thou, but like I didn't fall down really any of these conspiracy rabbit holes, and I'm like sort of very anti-conspiratorial. So like maybe that take that for what it is. I don't know where that comes from, you know, but just dispositionally. But so like I'm with that, and I do agree that there are real reasons for people to be skeptical and reactionary, right? When you're being labeled a bigot or a conspiracy theorist or whatever for saying that X, Y, or Z thing. But is that and this goes back to like what's effective versus what is like fair and right. It's like, where do we draw the line? But then when are people accountable for then just like throwing it all away, right? And just going down rabbit holes. And like we've come to it. The answer to like institutions that have lost trust is not everything the institution says believe the opposite, right? That's the point that we're at now, and that's dangerous,
ridiculous, because people people trust institutions. They say they don't, but of course they do, you know what I mean, because they still go to doctors, they still fly on airplanes, they do all these things, they go in buildings that aren't collapsing in them all the time. In society,
what a good point.
You know, we have to have trust. So they do, but a lot of this is like, you know, people take it for granted. And I'm not very conspiratorial, but I'm very like untrusting. So to me, there's not like a conspiracy theory that like I guess I really have like clung to, but the idea that like there might be bad people in the government who are doing things behind the scenes to benefit themselves at the expense of people is not a hard thing for me to grasp. Like I could believe that and see that could be possible just about anywhere. Power corrupts people often. It's often the worst types of people who want to have lots of power. You know, the people who should have lots of power are often the types of people who want it. So I like, it is not that I am like a naive person who, you know what I mean, who is just trusting, but the conspiratorial thing doesn't make sense to me. You know what I mean? It gets too fantastical, and it doesn't test, like, there's no, like, you know what I mean? There's too many people involved. Everybody has to be super quiet about things, and human nature is not really, does not super
Right.
itself to that, right? So, but it's not from this place of naivete, which is what I hate when
Well,
people are like, "You're a sheep." It's like, fuck you. Like, I've been my entire adult life as a fucking, you know, an insurrection anarchist. So, you know, so no, but also these conspiracies, that they've become like this weird type of like conformity in and of themselves right now, and it's kind of like interesting to watch all of these people who think that they are like bucking the trends in the system to all together like be moving this giant fucking cluster, like, I don't know. Yeah. They're all just fucking like, I don't know, brain rotted, following, you know, hypnotized, if you will.
And really I do think like it does seem like this vulnerability to conspiratorial thinking is like a predominantly right-wing phenomenon, but there's obviously plenty of left-wing conspiracies too. And I guess like the part that gets me is sort of like what Noam was trying to get at when he's talking about the stand down order for October 7th, is like, when you consider how many people, like if someone has maybe a really clean conspiracy that literally could feasibly only include like a handful of people who met in a room, right? And in their power alone, they'd be able to execute this conspiracy. Like, oh, okay. I mean, again, I don't know what that would even be about in this theory, but like for the October 7th thing, it's like there would be thousands of people who would have had to receive that order and acknowledge that order and stand down, right? And it's like it becomes at that point, it's like too many people. And it just reminds me of, and I say that it's not just a right-wing phenomenon, because when I was getting into the sort of gender stuff, the gender critical stuff, and I mean, I am gender critical. I hate that label. I think it's dumb. And I think a lot of the people in the movement now are reactionary and hateful and kind of retarded. But there were a lot of left-wing people in the anti-gender movement, which is probably like maybe surprising to some people, but also like something that people don't want to acknowledge. Is there a lot of left-wing people, specifically like the LGB types, right? Who came to a gender critical perspective. And again, I'm there. I agree. Like, I think that basically our medical establishment is based off of a political consensus when it comes to trans medicine. It's not based off of a scientific consensus. So all of these things I'm totally in line with. And then I found that a lot of people in that space believe that there is a conspiracy amongst the pharmaceutical companies and the surgeons in the medical industry, that they've calculated how much money you'll get from each trans patient. And so they are intentionally trying to create trans kids so that they will have a longer amount of time to collect money on these surgeries and interventions and hormone treatments. And I was just like, obviously that's not true. And again, you can see how it's partly true. There are some doctors out there.
Yes, there are people are incentivized.
Exactly. People want money. Exactly. So you are going to have people who are going to take all the standards and throw them to hell, especially when you have the governing bodies like WPATH coming out and saying, yes, there should be no standards. You're going to have people who are going to throw standards to hell and do total botch jobs and not follow up with patients and all of this stuff. And that stuff is real. And people who are overcharging and sending in different V codes and stuff like that to get more money for all of that stuff is true. And yet there is no grand conspiracy amongst healthcare providers to create trans children. There's just not. And so,
but there's like people,
but that belief persists.
And there's different ways people come to being gender critical, or however we want to call it, right? Like some people come there for like animus against gay and trans people. Some people come there through like radical feminism, and then other people come there because, like, well, how I got there was like an actual love and care for people who were going through this, and seeing that they are not being well served, and seeing that there are not enough guardrails and there's not enough like safety checks put in place, and that this is going to lead to fucking some major disasters, and out of a place of like love and care and for people.
Overwhelmingly good intentions.
Yeah. And from a libertarian perspective, like I don't necessarily care what adults do. I don't necessarily think that the government should be necessarily funding certain things, depending on the research and the just what isn't there yet. You know what I mean? And it just really, for me, it's like about youth. I really like adult wants to go do and adult wants to go to, like, I really, I don't need to agree with it, but like, I don't expect everybody to agree with how I live my life. You know what I mean? I don't expect the government to subsidize how I live my life either, though, in most ways. Right. So, it's just about for children and what I saw and what I know. And I'm in Canada, so it is a little bit different. And kids like have medical autonomy here as young as 14 years old. So, yeah, it's a thing. So, but you can get there from caring about people, and you can also get there from, just a pure, I don't know, from pure disgust for people too. And those are going to make for very different, very different people that we see advocating for what kind of policies and stuff that they want to see put in place. So yes, but there are conspiracies within all of that, and like depending on where you're coming from, your worldview and your perspective, that can also shape, you know what I mean, how I don't know, vulnerable you are, or how like susceptible you are to that type of to that type of thinking. But there is a part of like there is some amount of like, I think people who are like low IQ, I don't like really saying that, who can be more susceptible to like these types of conspiracies. But then there's at the other end, when you get to be so smart, you can also make them work, because like you can kind of like do the mental gymnastics so well.
Can convince you can rationalize anything.
And you can kind of like psychologically and philosophically kind of like pretzel yourself and your beliefs and what you see possible in the world. So it kind of goes full circle with that, but I don't know.
Okay, well, we're at an hour and a half.
Before we go, I wanted to ask you if you'd be interested. I was thinking about this. Rob Reiner, you saw what happened with Rob Reiner and with Nick. I think it might be interesting. I just seen so many really bad just also because you said you were a therapist or doing therapy before, but potentially talking about something like this, because I see a lot of the way people are talking about addiction and the way parents are handling their adult children's addiction, and seeing a lot of criticism that I think in some world could be valid, but in other worlds, like maybe people don't know how bad addiction medicine and addiction treatment is, that if somebody is telling you that it's awful, that it might actually be awful. You know what I mean? So like there is some, I don't know, there a reasonable person could, still want to support their child, especially if they have become very intimately, involved in and understanding what the state of addiction medicine is.
Right. The real lack of, I say like institutional support and resources. Those are fluffy words, and they don't even get at what we're talking about here. But right. The lack of like hardcore response and anything that you can't force people to do anything once they're adults, basically. And just the challenges that must have been, they're weighing, sure, they could have stopped enabling him. Maybe he would have hurt somebody else, right? It's like, I'm sure part of their rationale was they're trying to keep him and other people safe too, by keeping him as close as possible. Yeah, no, for sure. I'm definitely down to talk about that.
Maybe, an interesting place to go, just because I feel like, I have some experience in that, and I just find some of the conversations that are being had or some of the stuff that is being put out is just like, I don't know. I don't think it's helping.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree.
Well,
okay, so we'll talk about that
soon.
in our next conversation. Yeah. I'm just since our conversation went to trans stuff and people are talking about in the comments.
Mm-hmm.
This was something that Kay and I talked about kind of early. I think that's how you found me. Yeah, it was like through one of the gender podcasts originally, or maybe you saw me on YouTube Politics, and then you had realized that you had seen me from one of those. Yeah. And you guys were talking about Jesse and Katie and the Blockchain Reported. That was also that podcast, and listening to Katie speak about it in particular, Jesse too, but Katie in particular, because she was a lesbian, is what really gave me the permission to start thinking about some of this stuff more skeptically. And for people who don't know, my wife was like in the process of transitioning, basically, that I was helping her with, very eagerly helping her with, when I was very woke. And listening to that podcast was the beginning of really like changing my mind. And it was kind of, I would start playing that podcast for my wife in the car to help sort of opening her mind. And my wife ended up not transitioning and all of that stuff. But this is the topic that I think a lot about and I care a lot about. And I've stopped talking about so much just because I've gotten more into the sort of like topical political stuff, and I'm ADHD. So I get really intense about things and then I move on to other things. But I did a podcast about this if anyone is curious. It was called The Navel Gaze. It ran for about a year with my friend Aaron Terrell, who is a trans man who was also skeptical about trans medicine and stuff like that. And I mentioned this in our last conversation, but my friend Phil Illy wrote a book essentially about autogynephilia, which is the most common type of trans that people don't really like to talk about. My friend Phil is an autogynephile, so he's coming from a very thoughtful, compassionate perspective. And I just got a approval from him, not that I really needed it, but I asked approval for him. I'm going to read his book on YouTube, so create an audio book, an audio YouTube basically of his book, and it just arrived in the mail, so I'm going to start that soon. So for people who are interested in this conversation, I'll be posting chapter by chapter me reading Phil's book.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And you're going to do that on your
TaliBotz. Yeah.
Off my chest.
Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. Well,
cool.
It was great to talk to you, Tali. Hopefully we'll do it
as
again
always.
soon. Happy holidays, guys. Thank you for everybody who's hung out with us, and hopefully we will be back soon. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and
Merry Christmas. Grassroots Taftage was a guest on my podcast with my friend Aaron, the Navel Gaze. Yes, she is a self-identified autogynephile. She's also awesome. Okay, so stay tuned. That's coming, and you guys can go through look through some of those interviews if you're interested. Okay, Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Like the stream. All right. See you later, guys. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.